Hey everybody, I'm Mike, I'm an aspiring mangaka, and welcome to my channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be helping you with plot structure tips that will help you create moments just like this in your manga.
Even if it's already been decided, even if it's set in stone, I'll smash that future!
Alrighty, so tip number 1, find your hero and their protectee. So we as people kind of gravitate towards this kind of story, where a character moves past their own selfishness in order to take care of another character. So protection can mean a lot of different things. It could be literally watching over someone, it could be saving someone from certain death, or it could even be just protecting somebody from a bully. Now, who the person is or the object that's being protected doesn't necessarily matter. In JoJo's Part 6, the person being protected is the main protagonist of Part 3, Jotaro. In My Hero Academia, the arc with Overhaul, it's an emotionally abused child, Eri. And in Hunter x Hunter's York New City arc, it can be argued that it's Kurapika's soul. So what I'm trying to say here is, regardless of who the person being protected is, as long as you have that kind of formula, you have one thing going for you, which is the emotional pull that you're going to get from the situation from your audience. And that is really the key to creating a very good story, is you want your audience to be emotionally engaged with your protagonist. And this is one of those tropes that really works, specifically in shonen manga. So if you want a good example of how it can work versus how it wouldn't, then look no further than the fight between Deku and Overhaul. So in my opinion, this fight was emotionally engaging because it wasn't just about the conflict between the two, but rather it was about Eri and making sure that Deku could save Eri in order for her to not have this life of being tortured. Now, if you go on the flip side, we can think about a fight, for instance, between Goku and Frieza that didn't really have any emotional substance to it, and that would be when Goku wished Frieza back from the dead using Baba, right? So that is a scenario in which that fight had no emotional pull, and to be honest with you, I could care less about what happened there. Alrighty, so point number 2, action scenes are a dialogue/debate. So when you are going into your shonen manga, mangas have a long history of having fight scenes, right? That's kind of the crux of all of it. So when you are doing fight scenes, it's not just two people kind of beating the crap out of each other and that's it. It's actually a debate between the two, and you can use the methods of Kisho Tenketsu to kind of help you along the way. So within the final fight scene even, if you want to put it in like dialogue terms, you would say that it starts off with the characters trying to get to know one another again, right? Your main antagonist and the protagonist, they're kind of tiptoeing around each other, not showing their full potential yet. And then one of those characters kind of shows off a new move or a technique that they've been working on since the last confrontation, right? And that is almost like the starting argument of this debate. So then the other character has to come up with a rebuttal. How do you fight against this new technique? And it can keep going back and forth like that, just like in Kisho Tenketsu, you can get the Sho 10 10 10 Ketsu, right? There's a bunch of twists, there's a lot of rebuttals, and then it finally culminates in a victor. Either that's the protagonist or the antagonist, but knowing the golden rule, right, your protagonist shouldn't be failing a bunch throughout. So keep that in mind as well. But that is kind of the general structure, and it's a great point to remind yourself of as you're creating action scenes, right? And it's something that I get wrong all the time. It's very difficult to think of your action scenes in that way and to write it in a way that's still going to be fun to look at. So point number 3, pace your story with actions and reactions. So kind of the method that you can use is there should be a buildup of sorts. So the key portion of this, right, where you have these two people who are kind of fated to fight against one another. In Dragon Ball, you can think of Goku versus Piccolo Jr. In Hunter x Hunter, you can think of Gon versus Hisoka. There's a lot of examples there, right? So for good action and reaction scenes, we can actually look to some of the common tropes within shonen manga. You can also look to Kisho Tenketsu to kind of give you some guidance on how to even pace those particular arcs that are tropes. So the first trope is kind of the mobilization of the antagonist. This is a good trope to use because it's showing that your antagonists are a real threat, and it paces your story because there's not necessarily direct fighting between the protagonist and the antagonist, but rather the antagonist just kind of mollywopping everybody, right? So that's kind of one. The next one is you're going to have a bit of a training arc. So the protagonist might gather some intel, for instance, that the antagonists are on the move, and in order to actually fight against them, then they're going to have to train quite a bit. And these kind of training arcs can look like separate things, right? So you can have, for instance, for you Naruto fans out there, a total time skip, right? So from Naruto to Naruto Shippuden, you see that there's just this huge gap, right, in time in which everybody is kind of preparing themselves. Sasuke is becoming more evil almost, right? Naruto is training with Jiraiya, and then Sakura is doing Sakura stuff. An example of a more interactive training arc would be in Hunter x Hunter when Killua and Gon are training with Wing, right? The guy that looks like the professor, and they're kind of learning about Nen. Now, that's a great example of a good training arc as well because it's a great way to show exposition and not just tell it to the reader. So keep that in mind as well. So if we were to fit in training arcs with the action and reaction, training arcs would almost be the reactionary phase. And then after you have your training arc, that's when you start to set up that main confrontation between the protagonist and the antagonist. Now, along the way, you do want to have a little bit of a build-up where you're seeing that the main protagonist is kind of journeying their way through specific kinds of enemies, right? And kind of building up to the challenge of the main antagonist. Point number 4. Don't fall into the exposition trap. So, there are a lot of things that can kind of crush your story, but nothing can crush your story as much as really bad exposition in the beginning. Now, I know that this is really difficult to pull back on because, you spend a lot of time world building for your story, and whether you like world building or not, you kind of want to put that information in there, right? So the way to properly do that is to allow your reader to explore your world with your protagonist. That can kind of come in two different ways. The first way is that possibly your protagonist doesn't know the world either, or the magic system. Protagonist is the stand-in for the reader, and as they discover what Nen is, for instance, we're discovering it as well. Or the flip side to that is your protagonist already knows everything there is to know about the magic system or about the world, and we're just kind of along for the ride, and we see small tidbits of that world revealed as the character kind of transverses through it. But just as a reminder, your world building isn't meant for the viewer to see all of those details, right? Your world building is mostly in place so that you can create a system that your character can fit in and have human interactions with the world around them, and it can immerse your reader. So keep that in mind. The reader doesn't need all of the information, they just need some of it. And last but not least, don't use just Kisho Tenketsu or the 3-act method. Use both. So I actually made a video a while back. It's called 5 Tricks to Help You Improve Your Manga Storytelling. In that video, I explained both of these different kinds of structures or recipes in detail. But to grossly simplify it, Kisho Tenketsu is the structure used by a vast amount of mangaka, and the 3-act structure is typically used by Western society for movies, film, things like that, right, and novels. I think as writers, sometimes, especially writers of manga, sometimes we get kind of trapped into this idea that we have to do one or the other. Well, that's not necessarily true. The 3-plot structure can help us develop a good foundation for what the overall story can look like, while Kisho Tenketsu can kind of help us through those smaller interactions throughout that our character might have. So stop struggling, or don't feel like you have to choose one or the other. Mix and match. That's the beauty of being a creator. You get to take pieces of things that you enjoy from all over the world, and you get to apply them to your own work in a way that feels good for you. Alrighty, so that is the end of the video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you enjoyed somewhat of a new system, and please comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and join the Discord. The Discord is in the bottom left hand corner in the beginning of the video. I will have some form of a graphic to kind of point it out. Alrighty, I'm Manga Mike, and I'm out.